when 11-year-old Eli approached ex-gang member DeAndre with just $2 crumpled dollars, begging him to protect his grandmother. Neither knew this moment would transform an entire neighborhood. What DeAndre discovered about the boy's family changed everything. Like this video, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and comment where you're watching from. The afternoon heat still clung to the asphalt as Marjorie Brooks pushed through the creaking gate of her small home in Fresno. The scent of her fading lavender perfume mixed with something sharp and unfamiliar. Fresh paint. Strangers moved through her front yard like they owned it, measuring walls, snapping photos of her weathered porch. Clipboards in hand. "Ma'am, you need to step back." The voice belonged to a man in an expensive suit, his tone carrying the kind of authority that made Marjorie's hands tremble. "This is official business." She clutched her worn purse tighter, the doctor's prescription for her blood pressure medication crumpling inside. "This is my home. What are you doing here?" The man flashed papers that looked official enough. Letterheads, signatures, stamps. "According to our records, you signed the transfer agreement last month. The property is now under new management." "I never signed anything." Her voice came out smaller than she intended. A woman with sharp heels clicked across the concrete, smirking. "Memory issues are common at your age. Perhaps you forgot." Across the street, Mrs. Holloway's curtain snapped shut. A young delivery driver slowed his bike, taking in the scene before pedaling away quickly. Even the mailman crossed to the other side of the street. The humiliation was quiet, but complete. No shouting, no drama, just the cold efficiency of people who knew exactly how powerless she was. Marjorie's key felt foreign in her palm as she stared at the lock that somehow wasn't hers anymore. The distant bark of a dog mixed with the rumble of passing cars, but the world felt muffled, like she was underwater watching her life disappear without anyone laying a finger on her. The man in the suit was already walking away, phone pressed to his ear. "Tell Mr. Holt we'll have possession by Friday." The kitchen smelled of reheated coffee and worry. Eli Brooks, 11 years old with shoes worn thin at the soles, noticed his grandmother's silence first. She sat at their small table, staring at a stack of papers she couldn't make sense of, her usually steady hands shaking slightly. "Grandma." Eli pulled out a crumpled $2 bill from his backpack. "I was thinking, maybe I could give this to DeAndre at school, you know. Ask him to protect you." Marjorie looked up, her eyes soft with unshed tears. "Baby, that man doesn't know us from anybody, but he seems strong. And he's always nice to the kids." Eli unfolded the bill carefully, smoothing it on the table. "I could ask." They rummaged through the kitchen drawer together, searching for anything that might help. Behind old utility bills and expired coupons, Marjorie's fingers found an envelope she'd forgotten, yellowed with age, Aaron's handwriting still visible on the outside. Inside, a faded receipt with @27 scrawled in the corner, and a phone number on the back. The memory hit her like a wave. Aaron at 19, cocky grin under a backwards cap, promising her he'd found a way to handle things if trouble ever came knocking. He'd made her promise to keep the number safe, said it was his insurance policy for the family he loved more than his own life. "Aaron always said this number was special," she whispered, running her thumb over the faded ink. "Said if we ever needed help." Outside, Senor Alvarez tended his small garden, glancing toward their house with concern. Down the block, other elderly neighbors had been getting similar visits. Similar papers, similar promises that turned into threats. The old rotary phone on the counter seemed to stare back at them. Eli watched his grandmother's face, memorizing every worry line, every moment of hesitation. The tick of the wall clock marked time that felt borrowed, temporary. Marjorie picked up the receiver, her breathing shallow. The dial tone hummed like a question waiting for an answer. The phone rang 3 times before a tired voice answered. Background noise filtered through. A television, the distant sound of traffic, the ordinary soundtrack of a modest apartment. "Hello." Marjorie's throat felt dry. "Is this? Are you DeAndre Cole?" A pause. "Who's asking?" "My name is Marjorie Brooks. I'm Aaron Brooks's mother." Her voice caught slightly. "I have the number 27. The silence stretched so long she thought he'd hung up, in his small apartment. DeAndre stared at his reflection in the darkened television screen, remembering a courtroom from years ago, Aaron Brooks on the witness stand, telling the truth when he could have stayed silent, probably saving DeAndre from a much longer sentence. "Aaron Brooks," DeAndre repeated slowly. "Yeah, I remember Aaron. He'd been young then, stupid, running with the wrong crowd because it felt like family when his real family had given up on him. Aaron had been there the night everything went sideways, had seen DeAndre try to walk away from the confrontation that ended with police sirens and handcuffs. He said if someone called with that number. I know what he said. DeAndre's voice was quieter now. Through his thin walls, he could hear his neighbor Lena Carter putting her kids to bed, the ordinary sounds of people trying to build something good from whatever pieces they had left. Marjorie's breath caught. Someone's trying to take my house. They say I signed papers, but I never... My grandson. He's just 11, and I don't know where else to turn. DeAndre closed his eyes. He'd worked hard to build this quiet life. Janitor at the community school. Regular hours. Staying out of trouble. But some debts weren't about money. I'll be there tomorrow morning, he said finally. What's your address? The sound of an old sedan pulling up, mixed with the morning chorus of delivery trucks and school buses. DeAndre stepped out wearing his janitor's uniform, ball cap pulled low, carrying himself with the careful neutrality of someone who'd learned to move through the world without drawing attention. Behind him came Ramon Vega, still wearing his bus driver's badge from the night shift. His weathered hands bore small scars from years of maintenance work, and worry lines had deepened since his teenage son started hanging around the wrong corners after school. Tyrone Maddox climbed out of the passenger seat, the smell of breakfast spices clinging to his clothes from the shelter kitchen where he worked. He carried a thermos of coffee in paper bags that suggested he'd brought food. Because that's what you did when people were hurting. Luis Herrera arrived separately, an old backpack slung over his shoulder, filled with file folders and a tablet that had seen better days. His sister's constant warnings about falling back into old patterns echoed in his head, but he'd learned to separate helping people from the life that had nearly destroyed him. Mrs. Holloway watched from behind her curtains as the four men gathered on Marjorie's small porch. Senor Alvarez emerged from his house with a thermos of coffee, offering it with a nod that said he'd noticed the troubles, but hadn't known how to help. Neighborhood kids rode bikes in lazy circles, their laughter mixing with the distant rumble of morning traffic. The street felt different with these men present, not threatening, but solid, like something that had been missing was quietly sliding back into place. DeAndre knocked 3 times, soft but firm, when Marjorie opened the door. Her eyes went immediately to his face, searching for signs of the boy Aaron had tried to save. Mrs. Brooks, he said simply, we're here about your house. When the company representatives returned the next afternoon, they expected to find Marjorie alone and frightened. Instead, they discovered DeAndre and his friends positioned casually around the front yard, plus several neighbors who'd found reasons to be outside. You gentlemen need to move along, the man in the expensive suit said, his confidence wavering slightly. This is private property business. DeAndre didn't move from where he leaned against the porch railing. Public sidewalk, public street. We're just visiting Mrs. Brooks. Ramon held up his phone, recording, and making sure everything's done proper and legal. The woman with the sharp heels clicked impatiently. Look, we don't know what this lady told you, but she signed the documents, fair and square. Funny thing about documents, Luis said quietly, pulling out his tablet. They leave paper trails, digital footprints. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. Eli appeared in the doorway behind his grandmother, small but steady. When one of the representatives tried to dismiss DeAndre by mentioning his background, Eli stepped forward. He's helping my grandma, the boy said simply. That makes him family. The moment stretched taut as phones continued recording and neighbors continued watching. No raised voices, no threats, just the uncomfortable spotlight of attention focused on people who preferred to operate in shadows. The man in the suit straightened his tie. Our attorney will be in touch. As their car pulled away, DeAndre touched the faded receipt in his pocket. The number 27 had been Aaron's way of saying some promises outlasted the people who made them. This is just the beginning, he told Marjorie quietly. She nodded, feeling stronger than she had in weeks. The community center's fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Luis opened his laptop and Ramon spread photocopied documents across the scarred table. Tyrone unpacked sandwiches and coffee, while Eli sketched his grandmother's house in a notebook, the familiar activity calming his nerves. Look at this, Luis said, pointing to a pattern of signatures across multiple contracts. Same handwriting, different names, and these LLCs, they all trace back to the same address. Ramon adjusted his reading glasses, comparing documents. My route takes me through Parkview Heights. 3 elderly folks there lost their homes last year. Same story. Mysterious signatures. Sudden debt. An older man named Mr. Coleman shuffled over from the senior activities area. Y'all talking about those house papers? They came to me too. Said I signed something about my garage. But I never... He shook his head. Memory ain't what it was, so I figured maybe I did. Mrs. Holloway appeared in the doorway, nervous but determined. They came to my house last month, kept ringing the bell. Saying they needed to verify ownership, I pretended not to be home. A young man named Jamal looked up from his phone. My mom works at the county clerk's office. I could ask her about these filing dates. See if anything looks weird. The printer wheezed as it churned out copies, each page adding to the picture of a carefully orchestrated scheme. DeAndre felt the old instincts awakening, the ability to read patterns, spot vulnerabilities, understand how predators operated. But now he was using those skills to protect rather than exploit. Gavin Holt, Tyrone read from a business license. That name keeps showing up. Then we need to know everything about Mr. Holt, DeAndre said quietly. The dark sedan made its third slow pass of the day. Marjorie watched from her kitchen window, noting how it lingered just long enough to make its point before moving on. Under her door, someone had slipped a flyer printed on expensive paper. Final settlement opportunity. It read in friendly fonts. Avoid lengthy legal proceedings. Generous compensation for immediate cooperation. The language was careful, polite, but the message underneath was clear. Cooperate now, or things might get complicated. Eli found her reading it at the kitchen table, her hands shaking again. Maybe I should just sign it. Baby, maybe this is too much trouble for everyone. No, Grandma. His voice was fierce despite his small size. DeAndre said we don't quit, he promised. Across town, DeAndre walked home from his evening shift, hyper-aware of cars that seemed to follow too long, footsteps that matched his pace too closely. The old paranoia crept back easily, muscle memory from years of watching his back. He forced himself to breathe steadily, to remember that this time he wasn't alone. Ramon sat in his kitchen, arguing with his 15-year-old son Miguel. You don't understand, Pops. Sometimes you gotta show people you're not soft. Sometimes, Ramon said quietly. The strongest thing you can do is walk away from a fight. Tyrone's sleep was restless, filled with dreams of courtrooms and disappointed faces. He woke to find Lena Carter texting him. Heard some talk at work about you getting mixed up in trouble again. That true? Louis stared at his laptop screen, anxiety tightening his chest as he cross-referenced property records. His phone buzzed with another worried message from his sister. The weight of everyone's expectations felt heavy, but not as heavy as the memory of what happened when people like Gavin Holt were allowed to operate unchecked. Outside Marjorie's house, a police cruiser made a slow patrol, the officer nodding at the small group of neighbors who'd taken to sitting on nearby porches in the evenings. The community center buzzed with quiet activity as word spread through the neighborhood. At La Taqueria, customers lingered over their meals, discussing the Brooks case between bites of carnitas. The pastor at Iglesia San Miguel asked his congregation to pray for all those fighting for justice, while at Roosevelt Elementary, students whispered about Mr. Cole becoming some kind of hero. Luis had connected them with a legal aid attorney, Maria Santos, who worked pro bono cases involving elder fraud. She sat across from DeAndre and the others, reviewing their compiled evidence. This is solid work, she said, impressed. Financial records, witness statements, documented intimidation. We can get this on the city council agenda. Eli practiced his statement in the mirror at home, but the words kept sticking in his throat. Senora Alvarez knocked on their door with a container of fresh tamales, her way of showing support when words felt inadequate. At the shelter where Tyrone worked, co-workers gave him knowing looks. Heard you're taking on the system again, said Marcus, a volunteer who'd also left street life behind. Just remember, you got too much to lose now. Lena Carter faced whispered comments at her receptionist job. Girl, you sure your boy ain't sliding back? But she'd seen the change in the neighborhood, the way people were standing a little straighter, looking out for each other. Jamal stayed up late designing flyers and social media posts, careful to focus on community protection rather than anything that might seem threatening. His mother had confirmed irregularities in several recent property filings, all connected to Holt's network of shell companies. The City Hall auditorium filled with folding chairs and nervous energy. Marjorie sat in the front row, her hands folded tightly, watching her name appear on the official agenda. The auditorium filled with the sound of scraping chairs and nervous murmurs. Conversations flowing between English and Spanish as neighbors settled in for the public hearing. Marjorie entered, supported by Eli's small hand, her heart hammering visibly in her throat. DeAndre, Ramon, Tyrone, and Luis positioned themselves strategically, not clustering together like a gang, but spread throughout the room like community members, which is what they'd become. Each had a role, organizing documents, coordinating with the attorney, reassuring witnesses, maintaining calm. Maria Santos presented the evidence methodically. Property records projected on screens showed patterns of fraudulent signatures. Audio recordings captured the cold efficiency of Holt's representatives making their threats. Neighbors testified about mysterious visits, confusing paperwork, intimidation disguised as business. Gavin Holt himself appeared in an expensive suit, flanked by attorneys. He attempted to dismiss the complaints as confusion among elderly residents, unfortunate misunderstandings in complex real estate transactions. But Luis had done his homework. Dates didn't align. Email timestamps contradicted claimed meeting times. Shell companies dissolved and reformed with suspicious timing. "Mrs. Brooks," Holt said directly, his voice syrupy with false concern. "I understand this is confusing, but you did sign." "No, sir, she didn't." Eli's voice cut through the room, small but clear. "My grandma taught me to read when I was 4. She knows her own signature." Ramon watched his son Miguel from the back row, seeing understanding dawn on the teenager's face as his father spoke calmly but firmly about protecting the vulnerable rather than exploiting them. Jamal live-streamed portions of the hearing to neighborhood social media groups, while Lena Carter held Luis's hand steady when his anxiety threatened to overwhelm him during his testimony about how fraud schemes destroyed families. The council voted unanimously to refer the matter for criminal investigation. Contracts were voided, property rights restored. As the gavel fell, restrained applause rippled through the room. Saturday morning brought the smell of barbacoa, fresh coffee, and purpose to Marjorie's street. The community had organized itself around her small house like an extended family gathering. Soft Latin music drifted from someone's radio while neighbors arrived with paintbrushes, ladders, and genuine smiles. DeAndre coordinated work crews with the same organizational skills he'd once used for different purposes. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same ability to read people and manage logistics. Now building up instead of tearing down, Ramon brought colleagues from the bus depot, men who understood hard work and honest sweat. His son Miguel worked beside him, painting trim with careful attention. Listening to stories about second chances and choosing the harder path, Tyrone grilled for everyone, the shelter's industrial kitchen experience translating perfectly to feeding a neighborhood. Luis moved between groups, explaining tenant rights and housing protections, turning the day into an informal community education session. Mrs. Holloway emerged from her house carrying a tray of homemade cookies, her small gesture of apology for earlier hesitation. "I should have helped sooner," she told Marjorie quietly. Jamal documented the rebuilding in photos and videos, creating a positive counter-narrative to the fear and division that predators like Holt relied upon. Fresh paint gleamed on repaired siding. New windows sparkled in afternoon sunlight. The small yard bloomed with donated flowers and shared laughter. As evening approached, DeAndre carefully hung a reprinted photograph of Aaron Brooks in Marjorie's living room, a young man in military dress blues, the brother who'd tried to save everyone he loved. Eli approached with his $2 bill, still crisp despite everything. "Mr. DeAndre, I want to give this back. You helped more than I ever asked." DeAndre knelt to the boy's level, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "You keep that, little man. That money was just a reminder of an old promise. Now the promise is to this whole neighborhood." He stood and surveyed the transformed street. Neighbors talking across fence lines, children playing safely, elderly residents sitting on their porches without fear. "Besides," he added softly, "turns out protecting your grandma meant protecting all of us." The setting sun painted the small houses golden, and Marjorie felt something she'd almost forgotten. The certainty that home wasn't just a place, but a community of people willing to stand together. Sometimes redemption doesn't erase the past. It transforms it into something stronger. Have you ever been helped by someone unexpected during a difficult time? Share your story in the comments below. What would you have done in Eli's situation? Let us know your thoughts. Would you like another story?